All right, joining us now, he is the host of CRTV's Levin TV, the host of Life, Liberty, and Levin. Wow, you had big ratings this weekend right here on the Fox News channel. I call him the great one, Wonderful. Mark Levin. We missed you a couple of weeks, and we're glad you're back, my friend. Let's talk the election.
Thank you. Well, you know what? It's time for we, the people, to stand up for ourselves, for our families, for our faith, for our country, for our party, and for our president. You know, the media have interposed themselves in this election, Sean. We're actually fighting the media, we're fighting the Democrats, we're fighting academia, we're fighting Hollywood and all the rest. And 64% of the voters say the press has done more to divide the country. More people think the press has divided the country than the President of the United States. And I'm going to tell you why. The word Hitler is very popular with the press, with Joe Scarborough. The word white supremacy is very popular over there at CNN. The word Stalin's now starting to pick up. They consider those of us who support this president and support an America agenda as Nazis. They referred to us as racists, as white supremacists. Every time there's some horrific event, they try and pin it on us, pin it on our president, pin it on our party. It's really time, America, to push back. Enough is enough. We cannot turn any part of this government over to these radical, hardcore Democrats and their mouthpieces in the media. And I want to give you a few examples here. They talk about the president, his tone, and the relationship to violence. The president hasn't caused any violence. When Antifa's out there beating up people, the Marxist militia, the media are very passive, rarely say anything. When Bill Clinton pardoned the FALN terrorists who murdered 4 people and injured 44 other people, I don't remember them saying Bill Clinton was contributing to a violent tone in this country. When Barack Obama commuted the leader of that organization, who never repented, I don't remember them bringing that up. When Barack Obama befriended Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dorn of the Weather Underground and the SDS, the bombers, domestic terrorists, I don't remember anybody talking about him and violence and the tone of violence. Do you? Obama opens an embassy in Cuba, a genocidal police state. He's celebrated. Donald Trump moves our embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, the capital of Israel, and he's attacked by fools like Steve Schmidt over on MSNBC. Now let's talk about immigration briefly. Dwight Eisenhower, he's not considered a white supremacist, is he? He's not considered a racist, is he? Dwight Eisenhower, when he became president of the United States, he created a program called Operation Wetback. That's not me. That was him. Operation Wetback. What was that? He ordered the military to round up 1.3 million illegal aliens and deport them. And that's exactly what he did. And he was supported by the Democrat Party, too. I'll go further. 1960s, Cesar Chavez, the founder of the United Farm Workers Union, he ordered his members at night to watch the southern border and report illegal aliens coming over the border to then the INS. 1969, Chavez, Ralph Abernathy, who'd been the confidant of Martin Luther King in 1969, and Walter Mondale, I don't believe he was a racist, they led protests on the southern border against illegal immigration. I'll go on. The press says Donald Trump is threatening freedom of the press. How so? By calling them out? By challenging them? By exposing them? John Adams, one of our greatest founders, put in place the Sedition Act. The Sedition Act. He actually put some newspapers out of business and put some journalists in prison. Abraham Lincoln put out an executive order. They shut down almost 300 newspapers and put journalists and editors in prison. And not only that, the great progressive leader, Woodrow Wilson, he had the Sedition Act of 1918, did the same thing, put some journalists in prison and some of his opponents. Donald Trump hasn't done anything like this. He's not rounding up illegal immigrants who are in this country by the hundreds of thousands. He's not shutting down newspapers. He's not putting journalists in prison. Yet they refer to him as Hitler and as Stalin. And then we have this policy where we separate children from their parents who come here illegally, not because we want to put them in cages like Obama did, but because we want to protect these children from coyotes, from kidnappers. You got to sort them out and figure out who's who since they're here illegally. And they said, well, he's putting them in internment camps. Actually, it was Franklin Roosevelt who actually put Japanese Americans and Americans of Japanese descent in internment camps. They don't call him Hitler. They don't call him Stalin or anything of the sort. And I'll even go here. They attack our president. They say a womanizer. They bring this Stormy Daniels in front of TV, left and right, left and right. This president has been our president. He's conducted himself in the Oval Office with great acumen. Great acumen. Now, people are laughing. JFK was having affairs constantly in the Oval Office in the White House with an East German spy, with a mob boss girlfriend, with a 17-year-old intern, and he was outdone by LBJ. We don't talk about that stuff. How come? Because our goal, you see, is to trash the President of the United States. The media in this country, America, is campaigning against you, campaigning against your values, campaigning against your virtue, against the Declaration, against the Constitution. And you have a rare opportunity every now and then to show yourself, to stand up and say, we're not putting up with this anymore. We're going to protect our country. We're going to protect our values, our institutions, our party, and our president. And most of all, ourselves. You're sick of being called Nazis? You're sick of being called racists? You're sick of being called white supremacists? Then you need to vote. And you need to vote now if you have early voting, and you need to vote Tuesday, and you need to be your own precinct captain and bring out 4, 5, 6 people and make sure you vote. Because here's the deal. If more of us vote, we win. If less of them vote, they lose.
Mark Levin, by the way, I want to say publicly our condolences. I knew your dad. He recently passed away, a great man. Thank you, my friend, for being with us. Don't miss it.
Thank you.
Mark show, big show this weekend. Life, Liberty, Levin. You don't want to miss it Sunday night, right here on the Fox News Channel.
Coulter, of course, the best-selling author, columnist. You go to AnnCoulter.com. You can get a column there and get her new book. It's called Resistance is Futile. If you don't understand how everything went so crazy, just read this book. It's the best book she's written. Resistance is Futile, Ann Coulter's new book. Ann Coulter, how you doing?
Fine, thanks. How are you, Mark Simone?
Very good. So the election is less than a week away. What is going to happen this final weekend? Are they going to go even more insane?
I think that's the only way they can go. I think that's the only option they have.
And if they were to lose on Tuesday, you're the expert on this resistance. What happens?
I hate to make predictions. Who knows what will happen? And I do think nobody knows what's going to happen in the House. I think it's 50-50. But I tend to think, just for historic reasons, since it is 50-50 and nobody knows, that the Democrats will pick up the House. I hope Republicans hold the Senate.
Well, it looks like
one reason I really, really hope that doesn't happen, and there are arguments to be made, but historically the party in power loses seats, so don't be freaked out if Republicans lose the House. I'll be freaked out if they lose the House and the Senate, not because it's an historical anomaly, but just because it will be very, very, very bad for the country. It'll be bad enough if Democrats just take the House. If they don't take both the House and the Senate, I think that is a minority possibility. That'll be fantastic.
But then what happens?
To see how depressed they are, that is the spice of life.
Well, you think they'll get depressed. What if they just explode with anger?
As opposed to what's happening now?
Well, all right. Well, we don't want to make them mad.
I mean, that'll be interesting. If they take the House, will they settle down? No, I don't think so. I think there is one mode as long as Trump is president, and it is complete insanity.
Have you noticed all these leading Democrats are making speeches and doing TV commercials, and the whole commercial is, get out and vote. It's important to vote. Get out and vote. They never tell you why. They can't seem to think of a reason. It's just vote. They can't tell you why you're supposed to vote for them.
No, that's right. It reminds me of one of my favorite quotes. In fact, I meant to put it in my column this week. Maybe I'll slip it back in. Dick Armey, remember him?
Yeah.
He was a great guy. Not good on immigration, as I recall, but he used to say Republicans' problem is they get upset when people don't understand what they're saying. Democrats' problem is when people do understand what they're saying.
Well, but you got to admit, the president stoking fear with this caravan. Most people look at the picture of 8,000 people invading the border and say to themselves, well, that looks nice.
You know, this is when I want to go back to Ross Perot's idea. I don't remember the details of this, but he wanted national referendums on these various items. I would like a national referendum on should the Caravan be stopped? Should we have a wall? I think we had a national referendum on that on November 8th, 2016. Was it November 8th? Anyway, I would like a national referendum on sanctuary cities. I would like a national referendum on if you run across the border at 9 months pregnant and drop a baby, do you get to say, ha, 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 my kid's a citizen, even though no law and no Supreme Court has ever said that child is a citizen?
Well, when you see 8,000 people invading and they say, we're breaking into your country whether you like it or not, you have to be nice and say, maybe they're not happy where they are.
Yes, and that home invasion burglar, he's just seeking a better life. I particularly like that the Caravan, I mean, forget the MS-13, the already deported accused rapists and murderers, forget the terrorists slipping in with the Caravan. They're all burning the American flag, and they have the Nazi symbol on it. Hey, I have an idea. If you're just going to get here and complain about white people, maybe you'd be happier in a country that is not majority white. Well, barely.
But you know, the other thing is, you see where the news media really deliberately shuts itself down and doesn't do its job. Total dereliction of duty. They have these trucks shadowing the Caravan with meals for 6,000. We're told last night they were showing a movie. Where's the coverage of how this is funded or where these supplies are coming from?
Boy, are you right. Boy, are you right. No, that is not what the media will be. I suspect until the election, the media is demanding that Trump apologize for the synagogue bombing. Not bombing, shooting.
Hey, everybody's a little stunned. I mean, we know Lester Holt is Mr. Fake News, NBC Fake News. But last night they did the story of the president's visit to Pittsburgh, and the whole thing was slanted as if the president had done something horribly wrong. As if
yes. Yes, it's really weird. I mean, that is the debate on cable TV. Well, is he going to finally apologize? I don't think so. Well, I think he will finally apologize. It's just the premise that this is all, that Trump is behind this. They do this all the time. Somehow they are not responsible for any violence on their side. And this is hardly on our side. I mean, if this had been 11 Jewish tourists in Israel who were killed by a Palestinian bomb, I don't think most of these same liberals complaining about this would have even noticed.
Yeah, and this is the first family ever in the White House who has members who are Orthodox Jews. You'd think somebody would mention that in this awful anti-Semitic attack. Also, the greatest friend ever to Israel in decades. So how do they twist this around, that it's somehow his fault?
Because he's a very, very icky person. He's responsible for everything bad. No, it's utterly illogical, and it shows you that having Jared and Ivanka isn't helping, so he may as well get rid of them.
Yeah. So, Florida, what you would think this crazy mayor, Gillum, who made a mess out of his city, would have no shot, but the Republican candidate hasn't been too great here in this campaign.
Yeah, I can't really understand. The two states that confuse me the most right now are Arizona and Florida. In Arizona, you have really kind of a loon, that woman who would show up in tutus to denounce the U.S. military. That's the Democrat running. And denounce Arizonans. They have all these tapes of her from just a few years back. She's like a Code Pink lady. Cinema, I think her name is. And McSally is the Republican candidate. And they're running neck and neck. Now, I know Arizona isn't as red as people generally think it is. They did have John McCain and Jeff Flake, so they go for Democrats. But McSally was the establishment Republican. I'm hoping that the people who are telling pollsters they're not voting for McSally are the Trumpsters, angry that the primary voters didn't pick the MAGA Republican, and on election day their lives will flash before their eyes and they'll run out and vote Republican. But that one is baffling, and Florida is baffling because you're right, not really that impressive a Democrat. I mean, I guess he's charismatic, but corrupt. And what did he just said something completely insane today? What was it on Twitter? You've been up hours longer than I have. What was his latest thing?
I don't remember. But, the two things Florida has is weather and no taxes. Here's a guy threatening to bring taxes back. You would think he'd have no shot at all. Yeah,
no, that will be the end of Florida if that happens.
Yeah, I mean, if he gets elected and puts in this big state tax, you're going to see everybody leave Florida. Georgia is going to become very crowded.
Not only that, I mean, Florida, as New York, California, Connecticut, have been bleeding population over the years. For at least a decade now, Florida has been taking in about 1,000 new people a day. You've never seen such a clear experiment as the last decade of what very low taxes. Florida has no tax. It's one of about 4 states with zero state income tax, and versus high taxes. I mean, in my home state of Connecticut, I think it was last year, GE pulled out because of taxes. And where did GE move to? Where? Of all the places in the country to avoid the high taxes of Connecticut. Mark, they moved to Massachusetts.
Yeah, that's how bad Connecticut got. By the way, Stefanowski's the only thing that can save Connecticut, and that's neck and neck. How could that be?
Well, because all of the people who pay taxes have moved out.
Oh, okay.
Not a good formula for a booming state. Meanwhile, you go down to places like North Carolina and Florida, the places that have taken all of these citizens, and they're really booming. I mean, you get used in New York to things not working and highways not being cleaned up and just general decay. You drive around these low and no tax states, and the medians are so pretty. There are flowers all over. Vote Republican.
Well, hey, we're out of time. If you want a great book, get Ann Coulter's new book, Resistance is Futile. It's already a huge bestseller. It's your best book ever. And what was some of the comments people, like the certain things people pick out of that book to tell you about?
Oh, that's a good one. A lot of them are visual comparisons. The dossier, for example, which the media was pedal to the metal behind, and the fact that it was used for a FISA warrant was cited over and over and over again to prove the dossier must be true. Then it turned out the dossier was paid for by Hillary Clinton and the exact same hosts, Chris Cuomo and so on. I put the quotes side by side. I don't know where they got the idea that the dossier was used for a FISA warrant.
It's a great book. You'll love this book, Resistance is Futile. It's Ann Coulter's new book. Go out and get it. Go to Amazon, or you can go to AnnCoulter.com. And Ann Coulter, thanks for being with us.
Good afternoon. Welcome, and we are so happy to have all of you joining us here this afternoon. I'm Karen Tumulty, and I'm a political columnist here at the Washington Post, and we are absolutely thrilled to be joined here today by former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. What you had to say is that you thought the news media of this country has earned it, has earned the label enemy of the people.
Yeah, let me go back and point out, before I said that, I said anyone who sends bombs is engaged in attempted murder and should be tried for attempted murder and should be given the full weight of the law, because we cannot tolerate violence. So I think there's a difference between saying, what's my analytical view and what would I do? I have the same thing with Khashoggi. I've said publicly the Saudi Arabian position is absurdly stupid. They're not going to be able to sustain it, and they're going to have to ultimately, my guess is they'll ultimately punish 12 to 15 people.
But do you really think the news media?
I believe, in a way that you may be uncomfortable with, I believe when you have analyses that say 92% of the coverage is anti-Trump, there's something really profoundly wrong. I think when you have people on some networks who describe Trump over and over again as a racist, as being like Hitler, there's something profoundly wrong. We had one columnist who's supposedly conservative who said he'd rather vote for Joseph Stalin than Donald Trump. Stalin killed 30 million people. So when
you're talking about one columnist. I mean, the president describes the news media collectively as the enemy of the people.
Well, 92% that's the estimate of the negative coverage that the news media gives Donald J. Trump. That's not my number. That's an analysis.
Then you could argue that they are the critics of the president, not the enemy of the people, wouldn't you think?
You could argue that. And if you want to, it's a free country. If you would like to argue that, be my guest.
Well, we're just trying to keep it a free country.
By the way, we're very old friends, so I think I can say this.
I know.
There's an arrogance to that statement that people here ought to think about. Every person I know in this administration is dedicated to this country remaining free. And to suggest that the news media has a special virtue over the rest of us, I think, is a profound misunderstanding. And remember, Jefferson and Hamilton each paid newspapers to smear the other. We have a very old tradition of political media in the United States, although we haven't had a vice president shoot a secretary of the Treasury in 200 years. I think that we live in the age of the Kardashians, and that you get up every morning and something happens. And then you get up the next morning and something happens, and it's just unbelievable. I think when you see Trump on occasion, like arguing for a middle-class tax cut, and you see pieces that are rolled out here and there. You saw the Democrats made a real run for a while at sort of a Medicare for everyone, and that looked like it was almost going to take off until people started looking at it, and they've since backed off because it's not very defensible. But I think that it's really, I don't want to sound self-serving, but it is really hard to come up with 5 or 10 big ideas and hammer them out and get 200 and some people in our case, we got something like 400 people who were candidates to sign on to them. And most of the time, people just get too tired in both parties. It's just easier to be in the Kardashian tradition of, go out and get in a fist fight.
So you just don't think there's any way back?
Oh, sure. I mean, eventually, first of all, while people didn't particularly want to admit it, Trump actually ran a pretty issue-oriented campaign in 2016. It was just issues that the establishment didn't like. But Trump was pretty clear about his view of the war. He's pretty clear about his view of trade policy. He's pretty clear about his desire to get economic growth. He's pretty clear about the kind of judges he would appoint. And on almost all the things he actually campaigned on, his administration has implemented what he said. So in that sense, I think Trump, much, much more than Hillary, actually was giving people a sense of what you want to go. I was in the room when they first discussed getting 10 names for the Supreme Court as a way of getting people to understand how serious he was. And the people who were doing that were really first-class national people who understood exactly what to do. And I think in that sense you'd find the challenge with Trump is this is a good issue, this is a good issue, this is a good issue, and here's the noise. And the noise very often drowns the good issue, so you can't quite remember what the good issue was in between the noise.
Have you talked to him about that?
Sure.
And what does he say?
He loves what he does.
Okay.
I mean, to be honest for a second, to be fair to him, you show up someplace with 25, 30, 35,000 people. They're all jumping up and down screaming. You walk out on the stage, they jump up and down and scream more. You feel pretty good about yourself. I mean, you don't feel like, gee, I think I'll go back and get coached. And you sure don't say, I think I'll call Newt and ask Newt to coach me because, I remember when he used to get 35,000 people. I never got 35,000 people. I'd have been president if I'd gotten 35. So I think Trump, in a sense, is. Somebody said one time it's very hard to get somebody in their 70s to learn a new golf swing. And I think that Trump has, in his mind, a really successful system that has worked very well for him. Well, I don't know what they'll do, but I would suggest that they read The Art of the Comeback, which is Trump's second book after The Art of the Deal, and describes how he came back from almost going broke in the early 1990s. And if I were them, I'd remember, this is a billionaire who has fought lawsuits his entire career, and he's never noticed them. He doesn't care. That's why he has lawyers. So they can come at him from 100 levels. He'll just hire 100 lawyers and say, call me when it's over. I got to go do other things. I'll see I'm going to, China, or I'm going to campaign. But I don't think he has any fear of the Democrats' ability to investigate.
But he's been raising that fear out there on the campaign.
That's because he wants everyone to go vote.
And what about if they subpoena his tax returns?
Then they'll be trapped into appealing to the Supreme Court, and we'll see whether or not the Kavanaugh fight was worth it.
So the other thing they would face is the decision of who would be Speaker. A number of their own members, a number of their own candidates, dozens of them have already said that Nancy Pelosi, that they would not necessarily support her. At the same time, I mean, she was pretty effective as Speaker of the House when she served there before. Could you talk a little bit about, I mean, these kind of internecine warfares that I mean, you had a few, at least one coup attempt that I recall.
Yep, and I've written novels, and it's always fun. I would say, first of all, Nancy Pelosi is a very smart, very tough person who has earned her position by just brute hard work, by applying her intelligence, and by building a network that has sustained her for a long time. I would also say that anybody who thinks they're going to outmaneuver her is up against somebody who has spent literally her lifetime, starting with her father, who was the mayor of Baltimore. I mean, she has been in this business forever. And the odds, and she has all the internal mechanisms, and the other person or people won't. So I think in that sense, could it blow up? Sure. What ultimately got to me was a large enough number of members who said they would not vote for me, even if my conference picked me. So I couldn't get to 218 on the floor. And if she got a narrow majority and she had enough people say that, then she'd have a really big problem. But if all they do is say, I'm going to vote against her in the caucus, but if the caucus picks her, I'm going to be for her, then she'll be Speaker.
So do you think that that's what's going to be the case?
I think the odds are 2 out of 3 she'll be Speaker, and 1 out of 3 that Kevin McCarthy will be. And I think that if she becomes Speaker, she will have raised the money, she will have waged the campaign, she will have crisscrossed the country. I mean, who's going to get up and say she doesn't have any right to be Speaker? So my guess would be if they win, that she'll be Speaker.
Well, could you also talk a little bit, and we're coming down to our last couple of minutes here. Midterm elections really are about the president, especially this first one, and how people feel about the president. President Trump, his poll numbers are up a little bit, but he has been, for almost his entire presidency, historically unpopular in the polls, despite the fact that the economy is
Sure.
doing quite well. Could you talk about this paradox and ultimately sort of how this election plays out as a referendum on the president?
I mean, look, you won't like this answer, but it's part of the reason that my side is so angry at the media. I mean, if you look day after day after day for 2 solid years, what do you think people are going to think? An election that is this polarized. I mean, this is a president who really, his base is totally his. So he's probably at 45% going in every morning. And they've got to go out and find 5 or 6%. And we'll see if they can pull it off. But I would just point out that I lived through all through 2016 when everybody here knew that Jeb Bush was going to be the nominee and Hillary Clinton was going to be the president. And almost nobody in the establishment has learned that, Jeb Bush didn't get to be the nominee and Hillary didn't get to be the president. Because this guy is really very smart. I mean, you may not like his style, but he is very smart. And he is working very hard right this minute to see if he can't win the House.
And again, if he doesn't, what kind of Donald Trump would we see after that? Would he be essentially doubling down on opposing the Democrats, or would this be the art of the deal, Donald Trump?
I think he would do both. I think first of all, I think I literally think they're more likely to be at 57 in the Senate than Schumer is to be leader. So I think if you look at the Senate, he's going to get all of his judges. He's going to get all of his appointments. He's going to continue to reshape the government. Second, the one thing which I failed at totally in 2017, they ought to move infrastructure. There is no better bipartisan legislation than infrastructure. And you can have meetings and get people in the same room and all of a sudden have all sorts of people who want to work with you. And so there are a couple of things like that they can do. And then they ought to pick very carefully the fights they need for their own purposes. But I think they'll continue deregulation. They will continue to be aggressive on trade policy. They'll continue to be aggressive in foreign policy. They'll continue to get more and more judges. And I think they'll find, if the Democrats do win, remember also, there's a fair chance if the Democrats win control of the House, it's going to be really narrow. And they may not be in a very good shape to run things in the House very far, because we may be able, the president has lots of capability, and he might be able to pick off 6 people. And 6 people may be the majority. So, I think it will be a fascinating 2 years no matter what.
Well, I really appreciate you joining us here today, and
it's always fun.
It's always
we go back a long way.
It is true. It is true.
So can I tell them you're writing a Nancy Reagan book?
I am right.
He is writing a Nancy Reagan book.
Yes.
Bipartisanship up here, okay?
Okay.
Probably
Anyway,
ruined you at the Post.
That's okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. That was fun. I'll follow you.